Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we get to once again hear from you in the Q&A box. But before we jump into hearing your questions and reading your questions, we want to say thank you to all of those that have left a rating or a review on iTunes or on Spotify, or really any platform that you listen to our podcast on. And if you do watch our podcast on YouTube, thank you for taking the time to comment or for subscribing or hitting the like button. That helps our podcast reach more people and it helps us continue to do this. So thank you for that. A couple more things before we dive into today's episode. Thanksgiving is just, it's upon us. And it actually kind of took a long time to get here this year. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I've been ready for Thanksgiving for a while, but it's late in the month this year. And so because of that, the distance between Thanksgiving and Christmas is even shorter than what we are accustomed to. However, if you find yourself scrambling to buy a Christmas gift for somebody that you care about, somebody that you love, maybe that's a spouse, maybe it's a sibling, it might just be an acquaintance that's not even blood related to you. We now offer gift cards for all of our programs and products. And so if you're looking to gift music lessons, you can do that. If you're looking to gift the Get It All Done Club, you can do that. If you're looking to gift the Growth Initiative, you can do that. And so check the links below. You're able to purchase that and then get a gift card for somebody. Send them that gift or send it to them. You can just give it to them. You don't even need to send it to them. You can just give it to them on Christmas morning if that's when you open your gifts and give your gifts. And this is something that we kind of tried to get going last year. We had a few gift cards that people could use, and people seem to really enjoy doing that. And so we're doing it again this year, only we're on top of it. We're a little earlier to the game this year, so you can be earlier to the game as well with your Christmas shopping. So check all the links below and how to purchase gift cards for the Get It All Done Club, Voteberg Music Academy, for anybody that might want to learn the piano, guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele, or if you've got a husband that wants to do the Growth Initiative, you can do the same thing with that. So check all those links below. Now we will get this thing going.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
So it was super humbling to get in here and read a message from one of you who came back after we replied to your question on the podcast. Because I'll be honest, when we reply to these questions on the podcast, I am thinking big picture. Probably if someone's submitting a question on it, probably more people have this thought going through their mind, right? And so I kind of just take the specific person out of the situation and try to speak to just
like
in
the concept
general.
Or the principle
yes,
or principles.
The concepts, the principles, not necessarily like how you would sit down and speak to a friend.
Right.
If, this is a real sensitive subject in their life. And so anyways, I was just like blown away when Elisha read this response because the humility and the wisdom, like I want to meet you guys and learn from you in your marriage, because whenever someone comes back with a rebuttal or a critique maybe, it's really like first thought is defense,
no
right?
doubt. That is human nature.
It's human nature. And so I was just amazed. There was like no defense on this. And it was just so amazing. So anyways, thank you guys for being the best listeners. Elisha's going to read it real quick. And just, thank you guys.
Yeah. So she wrote back after we read her question a few episodes ago and kind of interacted with her question. She said, I just want to say huge thanks. I sent in the question about stroking your spouse's ego, which you both answered so thoughtfully and thoroughly. I think you did a great job of fleshing out and tearing down some misconceptions I had about healthy ways spouses related to one another. My husband and I listened together and both agreed we could do with a lot more verbal thanks of each other, for each other for the little things in life. Ultimately, quite healing and uplifting for our marriage. Praise God. Peace to you and your kids. We're grateful for you and your ministry. Man, yeah, that honestly blessed us both because
like, praise the Lord.
That was humbling to hear because as Katie said, we get on here and we're always grateful for you, for those of you that take the time to leave a question in our question box, and it gives us food for thought and it gives us discussion points and we get to talk about it. But oftentimes, like you said, we don't know these people personally. We don't have a relationship with them. And so you do a lot of piecing together. You try to fill in the blanks and you try to create the scenario in your head. And again, we probably aren't all that charitable when we do that. I think it's easiest to kind of be like, well, it kind of sounds like they're being immature here, or maybe they're doing this wrong. And I think it's easy to really lower ourselves to that tone whenever we're speaking about somebody that we're removed from, right? Like we do it here on the podcast, but I think if you hear about a scenario in, third party, one person removed from the situation, it's easy to just be like, well, they should do this, that, or the other. And
well, I think, and I mean, I'm interjecting here, but I think that objectivity is really the only way to address it. Because you don't know all the nuance and you don't know all
well, we can't.
We
obviously.
can't. So we just have to be objective and be like, okay, this is what we hear. This is what we're going to apply to. But it would obviously be different if it was a friend and they could give more context and all that. And so,
right.
Yeah. So anyways, just know that as we're going in to answering these questions too that you guys submit, totally feel free to be like, okay, there's so much that you're not getting to this picture.
Yeah.
That will always be the case. We're just kind of taking these as cues to address certain things that we may or may not be interpreting the situation correctly for your specific exact situation.
Yes, but we automatically apply it. We're like, oh, I think we've been through something like that, or I think this is how it showed up in our marriage, and it might be totally not related at all, but that's just the way that we take it. But I think that's what's so cool about having a learning mindset or a growth mindset, is that you're able to draw principles from people's feedback or critiques or just thoughts, and apply them to your life with humility. Obviously, humility is, a fruit of the Spirit. It should be a key characteristic of Christians. And being teachable, I think, is a sign of humility, right? I think you can be like teachable without actually having real humility, meaning like you can receive instruction for like your own gain, like your own growth. I mean, maybe it requires a level of humility because you're like, well, yeah, I want to learn this thing for my own benefit, and this person is going to be able to teach me. So yeah, maybe the two are, you can't separate the two. But it's really cool to hear that in people, and I want to have that because it's so easy. I was just talking about this, I think last night with one of my brother-in-laws or with a friend. I mean, how it's so easy to get caught up in somebody's like scenario and then just assume that nothing they say is going to apply to you. So you could say, well, for instance, I could say actually, well, I know my dad always said, it's like, well, your dad was a logger and he was married to, this lady and he had 10 kids and like, I don't have any of those things. So how is anything he going to say apply to me? And you shut down all the way. Right. And you can do that with any type of advice, like financial advice or with, health advice or your marriage advice and parenting advice. And somebody starts to kind of give the context. It's like, well, none of those things apply to me. So there's nothing that you can say that would help me. And obviously that's not true. Like we can learn from everyone. Ideally you want to be taking advice from people that are ahead of you in certain categories. But I think you can actually you can learn and grow and gain insight from anyone, even if you feel like you're more mature than them, right? Even if you feel like you're beyond them in marriage or you're beyond them in business, you can still, I think actually that's what successful people do. They learn from everyone that they're around.
Yeah, I would say that's something that I actually really admire about you, Elisha, is that's something that really stuck out, is you take criticism and you find you sift through it and you will find what's applicable. You don't just ever chuck it out.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I really admire that.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty fortunate to be receiving. Oh, they're right there.
Those are the questions. Yeah.
I feel like I do receive a lot of in-person feedback or online feedback from people that are, I feel like, objectively ahead of me. Objectively, so I don't think it requires that much like intentional humility. It's like, oh yeah, this person would know, so I should listen up.
So we do have some questions that we're going to answer tonight. We aren't just going to do one. We're going to go through a few of them. Do you want to read the first one?
Sure.
Okay.
Why don't you read it? It's kind of a long one. I like hearing you read.
Oh, really?
Oh, speaking of which, we've been going through as a family, our evening read has been have I already talked about this? I can't remember if I've brought this up on the website, on the website, on the podcast. The Howard Pyle's Robin Hood. I don't know when this thing was written, but it
is rich.
It is so good. And it's a combination of Old English with whatever you would call that like backwoods old England jargon, you know, that these guys were using. But and yet it seems so robust and like elegant. There's an elegance even in their I would consider like backwoods language. But the way that he writes is so I don't know, engaging and enthralling. And I say that all to say, you reading it out loud is impressive, because when you like, Old English is one thing, but then when people aren't even using Old English words and they're using these, like, what do you call that? Like that, you know, that like just a bunch of minced oaths that you've never heard of, and like cultural references where you're like, what even is that? But you read
It's
it
like
so
the
well.
cultural slang of the time.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's sweet of you to say, because we go straight from reading King James Version of the Bible to reading that. So I
Right.
don't feel like either of us have a real easy reading task.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's a lot of fun reading that. Yeah, you get really into character. And the sense of humor is really funny. There are so many good jokes in that.
Yes, it's extremely quippy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's elegant quips. It's not like low hanging humor. You know, like today I feel like so much of comedy is like this slapstick, like foolish comedy, I guess, where this you're just like, that is actually really clever.
Right.
Like, that's really good. Anyways, okay, we're going to jump into
Okay, real quick. If you're looking for music lessons for your family, piano lessons, guitar lessons, fiddle lessons, ukulele lessons, mandolin lessons, you can subscribe to Voteberg Music Academy and get lessons for the whole family. Subscribe to the piano course, one subscription, get you piano lessons for the whole family. Subscribe to guitar, that gets you guitar lessons for the whole family. We'll link it below. You get a special discount, and you can see that below by listening to our podcast. That's how you get the discount. Go check it out.
these questions. Hello, I have a question on your opinion on spending time with your spouse for an extended period away from your children and home. Basically, I would like to have a vacation with just my husband and myself for a week away to spend time, reconnect, and invest in each other. And my husband is very hesitant on leaving the children. After multiple conversations, the main reason he's hesitant to leave for an extended period of time is because he feels guilty, and he has used the quote, "This is what we signed up for when we became parents," which is funny because I feel like usually it's the wife that would say these two things. This is really common. But I have heard it from like so many women. So I'm sure men feel the same way too, but usually they're trying to get their wives to leave their kids at home. Basically implying that leaving for nights away is irresponsible, which he actually did say that. He's all for spending time together in date nights, just something extended he doesn't support. Our kids range from 8 to 1.5, and we also have loving family that would be more than willing to help watch our kids. I'm curious your thoughts about this.
You know what's funny is that I feel like we've gone back and forth from we've taken turns being on either side of this dilemma.
Yeah.
Where I've wanted to do a getaway with you and you weren't feeling it. You had all the pressures of life and motherhood and just keeping the home well, actually, I can't speak for you. I don't know what the pressures were, but that's, I think, how I interpreted it.
Or I didn't feel like the family was ready maybe for us to go away.
Yes, like the kids weren't in a good spot emotionally to get time away. And then vice versa. The thing has happened where you were ready for a getaway and you wanted time with me. And I was like, man, this is not the right time with where our kid's at. I'm not comfortable leaving them for, an extended period of time. And I will say, I don't think we've ever done a week.
Yeah, I do feel like that is quite a bit of time with 8 and a 1.5-year-old. I mean, I think we did 6 days.
Yeah, 6 days is the longest that I can think of.
And it was really long.
It was. And did we have 4 kids at the time?
Yeah, and they were younger than this. And
so
it wouldn't be something we would do in the near future, honestly. Like, I would say that was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
maybe we had a 5-year-old.
Yeah, 5, 4.
And it was too long, I feel like. I mean, the kids had a great time. No one was scarred or anything.
Right.
But it was just kind of like after that, we came home. We're like, we aren't going to do that again.
Yeah.
It was too extended. Yeah, the interesting thing about this is you really want both you guys to be able to be on the same page and be able to enjoy it. Because if it's for your marriage in the first place and either the husband or the wife is going to be resenting the trip because they feel like they were forced to go on this trip against their better judgment, if that's how they're perceiving it, then it's really going to be more just a strife-filled time than a romantic, fun time. And so it sounds like, if your husband's feeling these things, then our opinion doesn't really matter, to be honest, because it's not really going to do any good if we totally agree with you, because it's like, well, then what? It's Katie and Elisha and you versus your husband. It doesn't really serve your marriage. So I think we could just talk big picture about what we've done though in our home.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of any,
Yeah.
because we hear from both spouses, primarily wives, in the question box, and it is just it's a classic, the worst part of counseling, is oftentimes you're hearing one side of the story, or therapy, you're hearing one side of the story, and I guess there is probably a time and a place for that, but
not really. There's just time for coaching.
Coaching, yeah.
Coaching, yeah. There's marriage coaching is way different than marriage counseling.
Nice.
And I
Well,
really
do
think
explain.
this is good. Yeah. Okay. So the Empowered Wife was recommended to me on a podcast we did recently. We talked about the whole red pilled thing, and I'm like, I'm not red pilled, but I did as I promised, and I bought the book, and I'm not done with the book yet. But something that she said that I thought was really good was the problem with therapy is, one, as we have more therapy, marriage therapy specifically in our country, divorce rates rise alongside of that. And so it's not really helping, even if there's no connection. It's not like there's a good connection or a good correlation. But she was saying, the problem with therapy is it really focuses on the problems. And you're just focused on what are the problems in our marriage? What are the problems? What are the problems? Instead of with coaching, you're focused on your goals for your marriage.
Wow.
And finding solutions to get to those goals. And so you're focused on it immediately puts you in more of a growth mindset of, okay, how can we fix this, not fix this even, how can we get better to go towards this goal that we have, instead of well, tell me what you don't like about your husband, tell me what you don't like about your wife. Yeah. I know I'm
simplifying it, maybe
way simplifying it.
Sure.
But I think that perspective shift mentally is actually really huge.
You're right, because I mean, even if you're focusing on how you've been hurt by your spouse, it's like, well, they just repeatedly say this, or they can keep doing this thing, and it's so hurtful and offensive. Flipping it, I mean, well, how do you want them to treat you?
Yes,
and so then what are you doing to maybe motivate that behavior, that a response from them that is more like that. And it's so interesting that you say that, because I mean, yeah, your father's an entrepreneur. He coaches entrepreneurs, and he's amazing, strategic coach. I've been able to be in his workshops for a couple of years, and the difference in coaching, like you said, you bringing that to light versus other type of workshops, maybe, like you said, counseling or even masterminds or just like conference environments, there is a lot more of an element of okay, what are we working towards here? Now let's break down how we're going to achieve this. And you think of coaching even in with a sports team, because that's usually where our brain goes with coaching. Yeah, of course you're going to have to address problems along the journey, but the whole reason you're together in the first place is not to address the problems. You're together as a team for this goal of winning, whatever, your division, your conference, or ultimately a championship that year. And so it's that's what you focus on, and then as a result of focusing on that, you take care of the drama within the team, you take care of your insufficiencies and how you can.
It's you're forced to work through the problem to get to the goal. Mm-hmm. But the goal is not just working through the problem to work through problems.
Right.
And so, I mean, you think of it like business therapy. It's like someone just come in and complain about their employees, complain about everything that's not going right.
Right.
That's not going to get you anywhere in business. So there is no business therapy. Versus
that does that's where people's brain actually does go, even when you go to a place like Strategic Coach. That's usually how you start.
Rewire.
Yeah. Each time, every quarter, it's well, I don't know, we got this many people, quit. We hired this person, but it didn't work out. Sales aren't where they were this time. Whatever, last year, or we're down for the quarter. That's where everybody starts the day at, and yet it's your father's job, to get them focused on the horizon and get them out of the gap and get them in the gain. And so that, I think that actually is probably very prevalent even within business or within whatever category.
Yeah. We don't need help focusing on that negative.
Yeah.
We're just like, okay, what is the goal of marriage? Why do we even want to stay married in the first place? What do we want our marriage to look like 30 years from now? What do we have to build solutions for and systems for and bridges between in order to be able to get there, to have the family that we want one day, to have the relationship we want one day. So anyways, that is a total side tangent. But where were we coming? Where?
Well,
did
in regards to these questions, and I think there is, I mean, yeah, that's kind of always a danger in general of answering a marriage question when you only hear from one of the spouses, is you're kind of like, well, boy, I mean, so we're answering very big picture, not directly to this.
Well, we're answering, what we would do in our situation, how we do it. So, because it says, okay, what's your opinion? So basically, all we can speak to is in our home. And in our home, we've always seen it as an important thing to be able to get away. And that has included overnights for us. And initially it started out, we couldn't even afford the overnights. We would go on paid for trips that we had earned through a network marketing company that we worked for. And so that was a really big gift. Honestly, our first
those incentives worked
couple of years
for
of
us.
marriage.
That's for sure.
They did. We worked for them. And I think it was really, really special to be able to get away. I think one of the gifts of being able to get away for an extended time with your spouse is one day your kids aren't going to be there. And there have been a couple of times where we've gotten away where we've realized it takes us a bit to adjust.
Right.
And be like, okay, like I'm constantly just doing stuff with the kids, and Elisha's constantly doing stuff with the kids, and now it's just each other. Like, how do we interact in this? How do we have this fun? Because I mean, it's easy to squeeze fun in the cracks in your life.
Yes.
But then when that's all there is you two, then it's like, oh, okay, we've gotten in arguments on trips, and then it's like there's nothing to kind of separate and go about our ways with the argument. We're just by ourselves. Like, what? Are we going out to dinner now? Are we going to sit in the same hotel room? Like, what are we going to do? So I think it's like a really good practice to upkeep as you're going throughout your marriage. We've had a ton of fun. But it's also just this healthy remembering, like, okay, this is where we're at. Like, it gives you a good, like, you get to see on the Richter scale, I guess, where you're at as a couple, just as a couple, versus, not waiting till you're 25 or 30 years into marriage to find out with where you're at.
You're right. Because even as you were saying that, I'm like, well, I don't think it's bad that a lot of your enjoyment in marriage comes from the circumstance of being around children or your community or your home. Because I think that's going back to, getting into an argument when you and I were away. I think we were in Hawaii, if I think of the time you were talking about. Yeah. Well, we also had that one down in Mexico too. I don't know if you're thinking of that one.
Oh. That's true. I'd say Hawaii was worse. Mexico was more acute.
Yeah, that was high octane.
That was really bad, but a great trip. And Hawaii, it took us like days to find our footing in Hawaii. That was our longest trip we went on, and
away from the kids.
The kids, and that is where we learned a lot about how we should actually vacation together. But
yeah, exactly. But initially, so when we had that kind of like disagreement, and we had different expectations for the trip, and that was apparent from like the beginning, and then we were just kind of like sitting in there, sitting literally like in our hotel room or at the beach, just like basically, I don't know, both sulking a little bit in our differences of expectations for the trip. Back home, when you have, a little tiff, like tiffs that pop up, yeah, you have them, but then it's like life makes you appreciate the other person, I think, a lot faster, where it's like, oh man, like the kids are getting up from naps. It's just like, that's right, you're an awesome, oh man, thank you for making dinner. Like, okay, let's do baths, let's do family reading time. And then you find yourself appreciating the other person quick. And I don't think that's bad, I guess, where it's like,
no, I don't either. I love family life.
I think it's good if your family life makes you appreciate your spouse more. However, that's not going to last forever. And so you don't want to build up, like you said, 20 years of just all of your relational kind of appreciation of the other person being in the context of your children or the family. And so I think it was good. It's like flexing a muscle where it's like, oh, wow, the kids are away. It's just you and I. And now we're just sitting here you're not meeting each other's expectations, and we've got nothing to distract us from that fact.
Yeah, so that might be like more of the work side of it. On the fun side of it, it is honestly just really fun to be able to get away with your spouse, see them in a new light, and be totally footloose and fancy free. Like, it's totally different to not be thinking about baby or packing extra clothes, or just be like, hey, it's just you and me. Let's go do something. This is so fun, and have unique experiences together, especially when you do have little kids and you're nursing and you're pregnant. When you're able to squeeze in those times where you're just able to get away for even an overnight, and I think that maybe would be my encouragement is if you have family that you really trust, and it sounds like your husband's great with date nights and loves things like that, maybe pitching to him, hey, can we do a local overnight and just like go to a local resort or go to a local campground, or you know what I mean, and not do this huge thing, but could we just get away for 24 hours? And because maybe that's a better way to work into it, because a week is a really long time, and it might be daunting on a lot of fronts for someone to think of planning a week-long trip. And so just doing a night or two away might be a fun way for you guys to reconnect in this season, and it's totally like appropriate for the age of the kids, or he might feel like it's appropriate for where they're at. They won't be missing daddy and mama too much or anything like that. So
Yeah, something else, and what's crazy is that one of our fondest getaway memories is actually a couple of them are very local. We stayed in town and we went to a campground for one night, and that was just a total blast. And then another one was we went to like not a nice hotel in town as well. It was,
and we went skiing the next day.
That was a blast,
which was so much fun.
And it was one day. It was 24 hours, and it was a real treat. Something else that I think that I think has happened in our marriage, which so could potentially happen in other marriages as well, is that one of the spouses is feeling not necessarily like they really need to connect or want to connect with the spouse, and more like they just need a break from, or they want a break from their routine, from their flow, and the way they present that is like, hey, like let's get away and be together. And the spouse is like, well, like, man, do we need, like, we're doing the date night, I'm feeling really connected, I'm not feeling that. And maybe you could articulate in a better way, and I've gotten better at articulating, just kind of like, well, you know what, I think I just need, it doesn't mean I need a night away or a total golden free day, but it could mean just like, oh, you know what, I think I just need to get away from the challenges and blessings, but just the challenges of the everyday grind, and get some perspective.
I'm feeling personally burnt out, maybe.
Exactly.
And that has been something. I mean, just this last week, Elisha surprised me with a overnight at a hotel here locally, and he took on the evening routine and the morning routine and everything here in the tent by himself, which, I mean, obviously he's capable of it, but it's a lot. It's like a lot needs to happen at one time for these bookends of our days.
Oh, sure.
With the animals and the kids and the weather all living in the same location.
Yeah.
It's been snowing this week, which has been so fun. But yeah, so that was just a real gift, and that wasn't something I actually asked for or thought I needed, but then once he presented it, and I just started thinking, what? Like, sit in a jacuzzi, sit in a shower, just chill. It was just such a thoughtful gift. And so, that might be something too. If you're feeling personally burnt out, your husband might be more open to something like that. But I also get the desire of wanting to just get away and have a little longer time to enjoy just being a couple.
Yeah. I think that's good. And again, an expectation thing. We really have gone back and forth on you and I desiring that more than the other person. And then one of us kind of spearheading, usually one of us, the one that's wanting it more, kind of spearheads like, hey, like what would you think about 2 nights at this place? I could talk to where it's usually our families, actually almost always, except for one time, that when it's overnighters, it's been our families. And because again, it's a lot of logistics when you've got kids. And so, if you're feeling it more than the spouse, then maybe you could kind of start doing the legwork, not roping them into it, right? Not just kind of like, well, you're committed now. We bought the plane tickets. But kind of being like, well, hey, like if I check with my parents and see if they're free, we could do this. And like you said, pitching doesn't have to be 6 days or a full week, but like 2 nights away or something.
And I mean, just to address like the 2 specific things here too. He feels guilty. So it's really easy for a spouse to feel guilty. And I don't think that that's necessarily a great reason to not, maybe if you're the spouse that feels guilty, right? And you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that's totally me. I would just say, I grew up with my parents going on getaways and prioritizing their marriage consistently. And it wasn't like they were just jet setting all around. I knew that they were there 7 days a week, the majority of my childhood. But when they went on these trips away, and I stayed with my grandparents, one, it was really bonding to stay with my grandparents, with my siblings. We had a lot of fun. We got to do a lot of special stuff. And two, it honestly it brought a lot of security to know, as much as I didn't like my parents being gone, it was like they really like each other. They really want to hang out with each other. We as the kids aren't the glue holding the family together. They've got a relationship that is like surrounding us with their love. And they always came back so filled up and had so much fun and showed us all the pictures, and they never made it, again, I think the way they phrased it really mattered. It was never like they were talking to people and were like, we got to get away without the kids. They never said without the kids. My dad or mom would always be like, oh, I got to get away with just Chad. It was so special. And that's like how my mom would phrase it, or how my dad would phrase it. It wasn't that they were childless and that's why they were so excited. It was because they just got to be together. And so I think like that's something that I would just say is I don't think you need to feel guilty. If you're like a very present, intentional parent the rest of the time, your kids are not going to be traumatized by you being gone for a couple of days.
Yeah. Again,
I mean,
I'm with you a couple of days. Again, I'm sure people have done a week. A week is a long time. I don't remember my parents ever doing that.
Yeah, I am just saying like under 4 days probably is what I would
my
encourage.
parents, it was always a couple nights. I do remember they went to, but yeah, I was older. I want to say that I was like maybe 10 or 11, and they went away. It was a Hawaii trip, and I want to say it was like 8 days, and that was the first time they were gone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's long.
That long. But my experience with growing up was them doing 1 and 2 night getaways.
Yeah, and that was mine too. I think a couple of times they went 4 nights, and I was around 9 or 10 at that point. And then the other thing is, this is what we signed up for when we became parents. And it's like, well, you signed up to be a intentional present parent. You didn't sign up to never leave your children's side. And so, I mean, that's just that perspective there is like, it's very subjective because it's going to be different for every parent. And so, I mean, you sign up to raise your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, to be responsible for them, to, encourage their souls. There was a lot that when the Lord blessed us with a child, he gave us so much responsibility. But there are times where it's not, these two things aren't in opposition with each other. You can be there for your child and still be there for your marriage. And I do think that there's an element of remembering that your marriage comes before your kids that is healthy for us to remember too.
Yeah.
Is that our kids feel more secure when they know the marriage came before the kids. And I mean, we started having children right away. So I think sometimes in our culture, we think you do all your travel and all your romance and all your getaways, and then you have kids, and then you stay home for however long that is with your 3 or 4 kids, and then you are empty nesters, and then you go back to it. And so we see life in these chunks. Culturally, we're taught to see that. And I think what I loved about watching my parents' marriage is they were like, no, like you never put marriage on hold, and you never put parenting on hold. You just, I mean, when you're having 10 or 11 kids, you're never an empty nester. You're going straight into grandparent mode. My mom's still homeschooling, and she has how many grandkids now? Like 10, 11, 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
In that range, right? And she's still homeschooling. And so, I mean, your mom was doing the same thing, having grandkids and homeschooling younger kids. And so it's like, when you have that perspective of this is just life, it's babies and marriage and
parenting and grandparenting
and romance and all of it. It's like you don't segment it off so much. It's kind of like, how do we have these little snippets at appropriate intervals throughout our lifetime of just being a couple and enjoying that intimacy and that closeness in a new way.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with enjoying the Sabbath. You're like, oh, okay, like we're created to work. Like it's good to work 6 days a week and to work diligently when we're doing it and to strive for excellence. And so I'm going to enjoy 1 day a week of just true rest and reprieve and recovery and rejuvenation and just expect that this is going to be my life. And so when you have that anticipation versus like, man, I just got to power through the quarter, or I got to power through till the end of the year, or I got to get through these bigger chunks of time, it's exhausting and it's very overwhelming. And then you're usually let down when you get to the to the end, whatever that goal was. You know, like that retirement obviously is a
I
big
was
one.
gonna say, I
but-
think retirement's like the huge one I think of. I know so many people who have put their parenting and their marriages on hold, being like, well, we're gonna do all that when I retire.
Mhm.
It's like you don't have anything left when you retire.
Yeah.
Your family's exploded. So I think it's really important that we kind of have to, like the way God designed our lives, when you look at a woman's fertility, when you look at the 7-day week, when you look at all these things, it's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that throughout life. And so having that perspective is different, I think, than the one culture tries to paint, which is like, you're all in this season, then you're all in this season, then you're all in this season. So anyways, I would just encourage you to maybe just think about that and be like, well, if we have little kids for a long time, you know, maybe your husband's thinking, okay, when we get the baby to 10 years old or something, we'll do that. And that works for some families. And for some families, the way that they have children, that's never going to be an option. They're just going to have children their whole lives.
Yeah,
So
I agree. And I think actually speaking to this question, I think that there probably are minimum ages of our children that that maybe you and I haven't verbally said out loud, you know, we haven't said out loud, but maybe we're considering, where it's like, oh yeah, I could see being away for a week, or we could do our Europe trip then if we wanted to do a Europe trip at this point when the kids are this age. And so, yeah, I think there still are those things that we consider with the age of our children, but it doesn't mean we put our, like, any type of marriage travel or any type of fun, carefree, romantic getaways on hold until then.
yes, exactly. It's like, well, we aren't going to go overseas without our kids.
Mm-hmm.
We did it once. Well, we kind of didn't go overseas. We just went to Mexico City.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I didn't go over any seas there.
No seas. And just going through customs, I was like, I don't want to go overseas if something goes wrong. It was during COVID too, when we went to Hawaii one time. Do you remember that? We were having to get all swabbed and all this. And I was like, we could be stuck in Hawaii and not be able to get home and be quarantining. And I just don't like that feeling of like, we could be stuck a long ways away.
Sure.
Where we can't like get in a car and drive real easily, I guess.
Right.
You know, that would be my thing. Okay, so
Let's do that bottom one. I'll
Okay.
read this.
Yes, go
Katie, what are your Kolbe A assessment MOs, and how do you leverage those in your business and home? I had to take one for a job interview, and I recall that you guys had mentioned it before. Curious how this can be helpful from a practical example.
yeah, so this is fun. I mean, if you know my family, we sit around and talk Kolbe at the dinner table till we're blue in the face.
Yep.
Everything relates to Kolbe. At times, your life turns into a little Kolbe box, and you have to remember that there's life outside of the Kolbe, which Elisha has had to remind me as an outsider coming in who immediately got Kolbe'd before we were even officially dating. Because
first
we got to
time-
get those Kolbes.
The first time I wanted to date you, the first thing your dad had me do was take the Kolbe index, or the Kolbe A assessment. Yeah, the Kolbe A assessment. And I do not remember at all what my numbers were on at that
I think
point.
it said you were in transition.
Really? Like, is that, I mean, like in one of or two of them, or just the whole thing?
No, the whole thing. Like if you don't hit enough of certain answers, they say you're in transition. Well, I mean, I think it was the pressure of like maybe trying to answer the test for my dad.
Oh, no doubt.
Versus
Yes.
what you were thinking. And so it's like who Elisha was and who Elisha thought my dad wanted him to be. It was like you were too confused for the test.
Yes.
Your results were too confusing.
That's exactly right. And at the time, yeah, I mean, so the Kolbe comes up not just once per family get together, but multiple times a day. Every family get together on your
it's
side
because
of the
he's a low
family.
fact finder. Oh, it's a researcher.
Yeah, there's that high quick start.
Yeah,
Yes.
like I mean, all day long. So if you guys aren't familiar with the Kolbe, then come over. Basically, it's the funny thing is it's not even a personality test. It is talking about how you specifically work in a business, like how you would. What are your unique abilities? What are the things you naturally? It feels like. What's the work that feels like candy to you and what feels like pushing a rope? And the whole concept behind it is if you develop a business team or say, I love to do certain tasks and then, but like I hate paperwork, I hate details, I hate all that. And Elisha just can't wait to get up at 4 a.m. and do papers and detail and paperwork. Then you can create this perfect team and this harmony in your business where everyone loves the work that they get up and do. And so it's a great concept in business. And then sometimes it can totally apply to personal life sometimes. And then sometimes in our family, I feel like it is overreaching to where it's like, okay, no, that's just like a character flaw. You just have to like do the thing. You can't say I'm a low follow through, so I never finish what I start.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know? So it can become an excuse when it is overreaching.
Yes.
When the results are overreaching.
Absolutely. So with that said, what is your Kolbe assessment?
Okay, so I am a 5. Oh, well, okay. I'm a 4 research.
Yeah, I think I need to pull mine up. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know yours?
Yeah. So I'm a 4 research on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so I basically get the essential facts, like the bare bones that I need to make a decision and nothing more. Then I am a 2 follow through, which means that I hate completing things. No, I love to innovate and come up with ideas, but I don't love doing those ideas over and over and over and over and over. So that's even like where the Get It All Done Club has come in, is I'm naturally a mess with home management tasks in my home and consistency. And when you have kids and you are homemaking, then your home requires 3 meals a day and you grocery shop every single week and you have laundry. And if you're in a homeschool with any kind of success, you've got to do it. And so I started creating systems that help support my weakness in that area of naturally following through on stuff. So again, really good with ideas, but following through on those ideas is, I need support. I need accountability. I need to be strategic with that. I am a 10 quick start. So I have a lot of ideas and I like to do every single one of them. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of the nice thing about Elisha and I is I could be very opposed to something that he says. And I'm like, if you just give me like 30 minutes, I bet I'll be stoked about it. Mm-hmm. You know, so I get excited quickly. The problem with that is then you run around like a chicken with your head cut off, wanting to do everything. And then a 3 implementer. And I'll be honest, I've never been super sure what the implementer is. It seems like, I don't know. I think it's, I don't even want to explain it.
I think it's more tactile.
It's like how hands-on you are and tactile you are. So I'm a 3. Anyways, what is yours, Elisha?
Yeah, so I'm 5 fact finder, 5 follow through, 7 quick start, and 3 implementer. So we're both 3 implementer, and we've got an incredible team. Lauren, Megan, Blake. I mean, you go through the whole crew, like Jenny, like
everyone we have hired is high in research or fact finder and high in following through.
Yeah, which is just so clutch for your and I's strengths and weaknesses, the way that it really, it's a blessing to us.
Yeah, so if you were to look at like Elisha, he's a 7 quick start, I'm a 10, and so we just ideate like crazy. Mm-hmm. And so we have all these ideas, and that's where our team comes in. Really.
Well, not just ideas, we start a lot of things.
Yeah, we start a lot of things. And then we need people in our life to carry those ideas on, or we set up our kids as accountability partners and we tell them things and then they keep us consistent in home things, or we commit to outside people socially so we stay committed to a process, so. Yeah. And then Elisha, thankfully, is higher follow through than I am.
Barely.
No, I mean 2 and 5 is... You're in a different bracket.
Yeah, it is a different bracket. You're
3
right.
and under is like, and so I'm really grateful for his follow through and his research because he collects a few more facts than I am.
What's your research?
4.
Okay.
So we're pretty close.
Yeah.
Anyways, so a ton of the way that we view family and the way that we design our home and our rhythms is based off of the Kolbe.
Yeah, and so
our strengths and weaknesses.
I'll say this, and this is kind of, I think, probably a general issue I have. This is not a personality test, no. but it carries over into my issue with, I think, some personality tests, is that it's oftentimes used as an excuse for your shortcomings in character, and I think that as a father, as a mother, when you take on the responsibility for a domain, you're like, okay, I am head of our home, like this falls on me. You can't then say, well, it makes sense that, the kids aren't feeling very like I'm not following through with praying with them. I said I was going to read this book and I got really excited about it. I'm not reading it anymore. It's like, well, yeah, it's because I'm a high quick start and I'm a low follow through. So I really like to start things but not finish things. I was like, no, it doesn't work. Like you need to do these things when it comes to your home, when it comes to personal character and just being a person of your word and a person of integrity. That said, when you're able to know those things about yourself and you're in the workplace, then you can find people to either employ, or you can, like take this test and then your employer is able to see a good fit for you, where you're not even necessarily having to try that hard and you're doing a really good job, right? Because it's just like you're in this vein of work that really highlights your strengths in those areas. And I think that is a blessing when you're able to use things like the Kolbe assessment for that.
Well, I actually retook the test last year because a lot of my family was telling me, Katie, you used to start stuff and never finish it. And now, like you and Elisha, you say you're going to do something and you do it. And you do it for long periods of time. Like your Kolbe must have changed or something. I was like, yeah, surely. I'm like a 9 follow through. But it's like it showed up to still be that 2 follow through. The only difference was I've known this about myself since I was like 18 years old, that I like to ideate and not continue the process. And so Elisha and I together, I feel like, have come up with so much accountability in our life because we know the importance and just the character behind finishing what you start and being a person of your word, that I've just had so much support these last years that even though it's not the most fun thing in the world to finish what you start, I finish what I start now, the majority of the time.
Wow.
And so I'm like, that is how I would use a Kolbe. Is I would say, okay, I know this about myself. I know I'm not just naturally going to think, oh, this is so fun. I need extra support in these areas. So it can be people, but it can also just be the way that you design your home flow in your life.
Wow.
I feel like we've both done that.
Yeah, you're right. That is interesting though, because so you would say that even like when it comes to, after something, the idea is processed and launched, you kind of lose motivation and excitement for it. And so do you feel like you actually don't find that much fulfillment in finishing things and like seeing it through to completion?
I think it's like, I think my character appreciates it. You know what I mean? Like I feel more like a
person of integrity.
Yeah, I feel more integrity because I used to walk around feeling guilty all the time. Like I promised this, I was the yes man. I said yes, yes, yes. And now I'm just letting people down all over the place. I mean, you could take the magazine. It's like all these ideas for the magazine, right? And I'm like, this is so fun. This is so cool. And now we're in the nitty gritty of building out the magazine. And I would just as soon give it to somebody else and be like, just tell me when it's out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so the process that we're in now is not like the process where I was like, I know exactly what this is going to be and laying out and like selling someone on the vision.
Yeah. And again, even that, I don't even see as being that unique to what your Kolbe is. And that's just a general human nature thing. And the 4 C's, commitment, courage,
it's different than like my sister. So like Kyla and I, we work together in Neo Life, and we have. And she like thrives on getting up and doing those daily tasks that make something come to completion. Like she finds a lot of fulfillment in that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So like it's even like the goals we have for our kids. Like when we talk about what we want in our home, I have that big picture goal. I'm really excited about it when we start and we identify this is an area we want to grow in. And then it's like the desert between A to B. And
right.
Yes, there's...
Yeah, because again, I know I brought this up earlier, but I'm reading Fellowship of the Ring, the first of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and obviously there's the excitement of at the beginning of the journey, and I think we can just all relate to the variety of emotions that we feel at the beginning of a venture, whatever that venture is, where there's some level of excitement, anticipation, mystery, it's adventure. And then you kind of get going, you leave the comfort of your home, or you leave, in their case, the comfort of and security of the Shire and the familiarity of that. And you just kind of start second guessing everything. And you're like, what? Like, what? I mean, the children of Israel did this, right? Like looking back to Egypt, and you're kind of like, wait a second, where are we going here? Whose idea was this? Like, how important, like like the magazine, just kind of like, would this be that, we were so excited about it, but like, does there really need to be another magazine out there? There's plenty of great magazines out there. And I think that's just I think that's a human nature thing. for us to feel that.
You are right that there is that birth of a vision consistently. There's a cycle of a birth of a vision, the death of a vision, and then the fulfillment of a vision. Like, you will experience the death of a vision after the joy of a start.
Yes.
And so, yes, there is a up and then a down. Anytime, or you go through the 4 C's that they talk about with Strategic Coach. Anytime you commit, and then you need that courage before you have the capabilities. Like, you're going to want to quit on the cycle before you get to confidence.
Yes,
before you see
exactly.
completion, you're going to want to quit. Everybody out there, that is just the journey.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to rapid fire these. What digital camera did you use on your vacation in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and would you recommend it? Easy question. We use a Canon Mark II G7X as our point and shoot camera. We used it as a vlog camera for years, and it is
Great. Easy.
great. Great video, great picture.
I mean, we're not like professional photographers
No.
or videographers. We just want to, we want to capture the moment.
A lot of vloggers used it back in the day when that's why we got it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our 6th one, and that's just what we
Yeah.
use.
You're not creating pieces of art with this camera.
No, it's not
really
like blurry
just
background,
No.
whatever.
right.
Okay. Second question. How do I get my husband to help around the house with the chores? They have a newborn, and it's overwhelming caring for them while keeping up with chores and cooking. And I would just say, this is a really simple question, and just ask him, like, nicely, like, hey, would you mind holding the baby real quick while I made dinner? I mean, you have a newborn. This is new to him. This is new to you. And just don't be afraid. Like, I know we like our needs to be anticipated, and that will happen with time as children come along. Your husband's going to know what more and more and more, especially the more you communicate, what's going to be valuable to you at what time of day and whatever. With your first baby, it's like everything's fresh for both of you. And so sometimes he doesn't know how to be the most helpful. So I would just say, hey, would you mind helping me right now? I really could use some help. Anytime you need some help. And don't be resentful about it. Just let him know. And then help him and then don't critique how he's helping. Just let him help.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, okay. Yeah. That makes not critique ever. Like, even if it keeps like putting the dishes away in the wrong place, you know?
I mean,
No?
you've never put them away in the right place.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And but you still tell me. Like, you still tell me that
I've never told you. I've never critiqued you. In the moment, I'll just be like, oh, I know you noticed you put the dishes away because I found the spatula up on top of the
yeah.
up of the
Whatever.
cups.
Yeah.
No, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's not like you didn't put the dishes away. The spatula goes over here. I've told you 3 times the spatula goes in this drawer.
Yeah, that's no fun.
You know what I'm saying? It's like that.
Right. And you know what's crazy is I've definitely not, I don't know if this is actually crazy. I've so been on both sides of that, like wanting you to anticipate, you know, how I want you to serve me and then building up resentment and being like, and then kind of
I
be like,
do want to get better.
well, no, like it's a silly, it's an unfair expectation to have put on your spouse where it's like, why didn't you know that this is what I wanted? And it's like, oh, I didn't, because I didn't. Like, that's how I didn't know. It's because I didn't know. And so I've been way unfair in doing that. And rather than just being like, hey, you know, could you just say in a nice, calm tone, like, hey, whatever, you know, like when we're getting ready to go to church, would you be able to do this, you know, before you do that? So that way, you know, because that would help me with the order of getting ready to go to church, right? Versus like week after week after week, like, why don't they know that this bugs me when they do this thing first instead of this thing? And so I've been guilty of doing that. And on the flip side, I've also feel like I've been the recipient of like feeling like you've assumed I'm just like neglecting you because
Totally.
I wasn't there. And I want to get better at anticipating how I can serve you, but it is not fun to all of a sudden be on the defensive and be like, why aren't you helping me? I've got the kids, I've got dinner, I've got,
do that?
no, if it ever feels like that, like, I don't think you've ever done that.
I just say, why
No,
aren't you
no,
helping?
no.
I know.
And be like, oh, duh. Like, again, it's like, of course I want to anticipate those things, but it's just so much easier to receive it if you're kind of like, hey, would you mind, like you said, holding the baby while I make dinner, or would you mind?
Yeah, I have not always had the best tone. I mean, this is not.
No,
I'm
I don't
saying
think you've been bad at
this
all.
This is the best situation, best case scenario, and just knowing too, the more that you communicate, then the more it's going to make it easier in the long run because
Yes.
they're going to hear over and over and over. Oh, this really matters to her, or I have, I mean, Elisha and I have picked up a lot on each other's cues
Yeah.
on what is helpful and what is not helpful.
No doubt.
But we're still
Oh, you
growing.
anticipate, my needs better than I do, and it's a huge
stop.
blessing.
No, that's
I
not
think
true.
I it is true.
No, I know I need to get better. I do. Okay, and this is one real quick one too, because we've touched on it before, so I don't want to go super deep into it. It says, can you talk on your thoughts about classical conversations, especially your thoughts about this particular cycle and the history memorization of other religious beliefs? And I would say, I think it's wonderful because we live in a world with different religions, and I get to be the one teaching my kids, hey, this is Taoism, this is Hinduism, this is Buddhism. Like, what are the similarities? What are the differences? Isn't it interesting that everybody wants to have a God? You know, the Greek gods, the Roman gods have been around forever. We also catechize our kids, so they do know there's only one true God. It's in 3 persons. These are his names. And everything else, I mean, you read the Greek myths and you think, wow, they have a creation story that sounds eerily like ours. They've got a flood. They've got Pandora's box. They have sin coming into the world, right? And so I think it just, our kids are going to know there's different religions out there at some point. What better time than to teach them and to learn about different religions, and so that they know when they come in contact with someone who is that religion, how they differ.
Yeah. Oftentimes you don't actually come across somebody that is that religion, but they're getting wisps of it. You're kind of like, this has whispers of Hinduism, or more likely it's things like New Age, or Scientology. Like it's later on other cults and religions that you're kind of like, you're calling yourself a Christian, but this sounds way more, like it's got like Taoism. It has these influences that actually are not Christianity, and you're able to identify it.
Yeah, I want my kids to know, karma, reincarnation. These are things that are not gospel centered. This is where they're coming in from. They're coming in from Hinduism. So anyways, I think it's actually really important for kids. Again, we want our kids to be critical thinkers. And that means thinking and considering and weighing both sides of an issue. And you're like, clearly not everybody walking around believes in our same God. Why is that? And what do they believe? And so I think it's a great study.
Nice. Great.
Okay, that's it.
Awesome, folks. Thank you all so much for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.